So, let's talk about how a single musical scale can become a cultural battleground. Seriously. This isn't just about music theory. It's a really fascinating story about sound, psychology, and how we decide who belongs and who gets labeled as the other.
To get started, let me ask you something. Have you ever put on a piece of music and it just felt different? I don't just mean a new genre you haven't heard. I mean something that feels like it's from another world, playing by a completely different set of rules. What is it that creates that feeling?
Well, to figure that out, we need to know what normal sounds like. Most of the music we hear, from old-school symphonies to the latest pop hit, is built on what we call major and minor scales. And the whole point of that system is to create order. It builds up tension, and then, and this is the important part, it resolves it, making you feel, sonically at home.
Okay, now here's where it gets really interesting. That musical stability actually has a perfect parallel in psychoanalytic theory. A thinker named Jacques Lacan called it the symbolic order. It's basically the invisible structure of our society. Language, laws, social customs, all the official sort of paternal rules that hold our world together.
And this is how it all connects back to music. You can think of traditional Western music, with its clear rules and satisfying resolutions, as a kind of sonic metaphor for that symbolic order. It's the sound of the law, rational, stable, and making sure everything stays in its proper place.
So, what happens when a sound comes along that just refuses to play by those rules? A sound that's so emotional, so powerful, that the orderly system just can't quite handle it. Well, that's where the main character of our story makes its entrance.
It's called the Fraigish scale, or Ahava Rabbah. It's an absolutely foundational sound in Jewish prayer and that incredible folk music known as klezmer. And its sound, well, it's instantly recognizable. People describe it as being full of yearning or deeply nostalgic, almost like it has this Middle Eastern vibe to it.
So, what's the secret sauce here? Imagine you're walking up a staircase, and all the steps are evenly spaced. But then, suddenly there's one really big, unexpected step, a dramatic leap. That's kind of what the Fraigish scale does. In music speak, it's called an augmented second. And that one little jump is the key ingredient that gives the scale its incredibly potent emotional punch.
All right, so if the orderly, rule-based music represents the symbolic, what does this rule-breaking, emotional sound represent? For that, we turn to another theorist, Julia Kristeva, and her idea of the semiotic chora. Think of it as the complete opposite of the symbolic. It's this pre-language, maternal world of pure rhythm, gut instinct, and raw emotion. It's all the feeling that exists before any of the rules get put in place.
And right here you can see the two sides of the conflict laid out perfectly. On one side you've got the symbolic order, paternal, all about rules and stability, represented by traditional Western music. And on the other you have the semiotic chora, maternal, all about emotion and instinct, embodied by the Fraidish scale. This is the fundamental clash we're digging into.
Now, you might be thinking, hey, wait a minute. Hasn't Western music had its own share of dangerous sounds? And you'd be absolutely right. The tradition has a long history of freaking out about certain sounds it found unsettling.
But this is where we have to make a really crucial distinction. Western music had its own so-called devil in music, an interval called the tritone. But it was always seen as an internal sin, a problem that existed within their own system. The augmented second from the Frairischic scale, that was treated as a completely external threat. It wasn't our problem, it was a foreign sound from a different system entirely. And that changes everything. It's no longer a theological issue, it's a cultural one.
And because it was framed as foreign, this sound became a weapon. In places like late 19th century Vienna, which was this crazy hub of both incredible modern art and just vicious anti-Semitism, this musical otherness was projected directly onto Jewish people, who were already being painted as outsiders.
The music itself got hit with all these ugly stereotypes. Critics called it noisy and theatrical, basically saying it was fake. They labeled it sensual and bodily, framing it as this base, primitive threat to their clean, rational society. In short, it was seen as dangerous, a sound that could tear down the whole social order.
And this really gets to the heart of it. For people who were already prejudiced, the very sound of this scale became the audible proof they were looking for. It was used as evidence that Jewish people were the other, emotional, chaotic, and a threat to the so-called rational mind of Western culture.
And here's the final twist. The system tried to control this sound by putting it in a box. Western music theory came along and gave it a new name, Phrygian dominant, essentially trying to cram it into their existing rulebook. It's a classic move from the symbolic order. If you can't get rid of it, just absorb it and rename it so it fits your logic.
So when you pull all these threads together, you see this massive psychocultural clash. And it becomes so clear that this was never, ever just about notes on a page. At the end of the day, the conflict was between two opposing worlds. You had the symbolic sound of Western music, representing the proper, rational, paternal society, and pitted against it was the semiotic sound of the Frege scale, which got stereotyped as the emotional, bodily other. What we're really hearing is a cultural panic, expressed in musical form. And that is the absolute key takeaway here. The friction caused by the Frege scale, it was never really about music. It was the sound of a dominant culture coming face to face with the raw, semiotic emotion it had worked so hard to push down and project onto someone else.
And all of this leaves us with one final thought. I mean, this stuff happened over a century ago, but that dynamic is timeless. So I'll just leave you with this question to chew on. Think about the music you love right now, especially the stuff that feels a little rebellious or pushes the envelope. What cultural rules is it breaking? And what does that say about us, right here, right now?